Hey friends, Andy here. Welcome back to the podcast. Some sad news today. This episode includes Pam Wall. Pam Wall recently passed away, our dear friend and sailing mentor to us and many other people. It's a sad coincidence that this episode happens to come out today. When Laura and I recorded the pre-intro you're about to hear, we knew Pam was not doing great, but we didn't expect it was going to go this quick. On the way to Amsterdam, motoring out the river, I actually wrote sort of a eulogy to Pam that was published on Sail magazine. So I'm just going to read that now to honor the life of Pam Wall. 8 bells for Pam Wall. There's a scene in the movie Moana when Tala, the grandmother figure of Motunui, a fictional South Pacific island, is lying on her deathbed, speaking her last words of wisdom to the titular character, who must go to sea to save her village and the world. But Moana is afraid of leaving her grandmother behind. "There's nowhere that you can go that I won't be with you," grandmother Tala whispers to Moana, who by those words musters the courage to sail out beyond the reef and off to her destiny. Grandmother Tala always reminded me of Pam. In fact, many people referred to Pam as Grandma Ocean, especially later in her life. Pam died on August 2nd, 2024 at 80 years old. She was a legendary sailor from a generation of legendary sailors, the OG strong woman at sea figure that so inspired Mia, my wife, and many others. From Chicago originally, Pam grew up sailing on her father's racing boat on Lake Michigan. Later, while living in Florida, she was swept off her feet by a strapping Australian solo sailor named Andy Wall, who had big cruising plans. It was love at first sight, and Pam signed on immediately. Her first of many Atlantic crossings was on the tiny 28-foot Carronade, a boat that Andy had quietly sailed around Cape Horn, becoming the first private Australian yacht to do so and the smallest at the time. Pam and Andy led a life at sea together, eventually buying the plans to an iconic ocean racer, the Freya 39, which held the distinction of winning the Sydney to Hobart race 3 years straight in the 1960s. They laid up the hull themselves and completed the boat, circumnavigating before the GPS age with their young children, Jamie and Samantha. Pam continued to sail Candarrick, keeping the iconic boat in perfect condition on her backyard dock in a canal in Fort Lauderdale until the day she died. Pam's life was at once tragic and inspirational. She lost Samantha and Andy to cancer in quick succession, yet remained one of the most passionate and positive people I'd ever met. I'd known Pam since the late 2000s, having met her at a cookout at John Kretschmer's house in Fort Lauderdale after one of his celestial navigation workshops. Pam always reminded me of my own mom, who I lost to cancer in 2012, and became a kind of Grandma Ocean to Mia and myself, and later to our son Axel. But we weren't unique. Pam's family became the sailing community, and she took many a young cruiser under her wing. She worked together with West Marine for years, helping cruisers outfit their boats for long-distance voyaging, and continued to give lectures and share her stories into her late 70s. Pam had a special way of telling sea stories, able to entertain a room full of sailors while sharing timeless lessons on seamanship. Both Mia and I have had the privilege of staying with Pam at her Fort Lauderdale house, using it as a home base of sorts when we'd been in town to update our licenses or complete a medical exam. The place was a museum. All the classic sailing books on a floor-to-ceiling bookshelf that Andy built in the same style as Candarrick's Harrishoff interior, an old belaying pin from Sterling Hayden's Wanderer, photo albums and handwritten logbooks from Candarrick and Carronade. I can only hope that they find a good home to carry on the legacy that Pam has created. One of her final legacies was helping her son Jamie found the Foundation Comble in France in honor of her late daughter Samantha. The foundation supports emerging artists and artists in residence with a focus on exhibition and an effort to help inspire and support the art community, to harmonize and cross-pollinate, to perpetuate and ultimately grow the essential gift the visual arts leave to the record of civilization. In the film Moana, Grandmother Tala passes away completely at peace with a life well lived, inspiring the younger generation to follow their hearts to the sea. And I'm confident Pam went in much the same way. When Moana is struggling to find her way, alone on the open ocean, Grandmother Tala's spirit returns in the form of a phosphorescent stingray, giving hope and courage to Moana to keep going. I have no doubt that Pam's spirit will be there at sea as well, with all the people she's touched and inspired in her beautiful life. Hey, shipmates. Welcome back to On the Wind. I'm your host, Andy Schell. Recording this in the past, as you listen to it, I'm sitting on Falcon in the nav station in Amsterdam. Mia's in the background. Say hi, Mia. Hello. We're about to set off for Sweden. Crew come tomorrow as I record this, and we are off to Marstrand, one of our favorite places in the world. We've enjoyed a couple days here in Amsterdam, which has been super cool. Never been here before. There's a new stop for 59 North, so had some fun here. I'm recording this because I'm going to be off the grid sailing for the next little bit. I want to give some context to this episode. I do a brief little pre-intro interview with Laura Parent, who is the kind of half host of this episode with Pam Wall. Laura works for 59 North. She's been working for us for several years now, doing some behind-the-scenes admin type stuff based out of San Francisco. Laura is also a lifelong sailor herself. She's a sailing coach and a captain based out of San Francisco. She's done a bunch of deliveries recently, done a few big races, and joins us when she can. It's a bit we're scattered, so I don't often get to talk to Laura. So this was a nice little catch up. But Laura was in Fort Lauderdale over the holidays with Pam, and well, I'll let her tell you the story of how this episode came together. But that's who is hosting it this week. Couple quick updates on 59 North. We've got the boat show coming up, sort of coming up. It's only August when you hear this, but in October we'll be back in Annapolis. We've got this seminar that we're hosting in conjunction with Brady and Blue from Cruisers Academy. So if you want to hear us talk with them at Boat Show, sign up for that. We also have our big crew party on Friday night at Boat Show. We had like 200 plus people there last year. It was super fun. Nice informal way to meet us and meet like-minded sailors. We're doing that again in Annapolis. And of course, we have a booth in conjunction with Harbor Burn Cannons, my other little side business selling signal cannons. You can check all that out at 59-north.com/boat show. Our sailing season is winding down here, so not much to say on that front. If you do want to sail with us, we've got a few openings next year on both boats. And we're looking at adding some trips on Eastbjorn in late summer of 2025, so like 1 year from now. So if you want to sail with us, we hope to have you. Check out all the open bunks on 59-north.com/bunks. Everything we have open for the next couple of years of what's published is up there. Don't forget about the racing program with Nikki Henderson. We've got that opening as well. All right, that's it for me. I'm off to Marstrand. Although when you hear this, I hopefully will be there. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Until next time, hold fast. All right. So, Laura, I'm on Falcon. You're in San Francisco. We rarely get to talk because of the time difference. And you are making a you basically took over the podcast when you were with our dear friend Pam Wall in Florida a few months back, and we've been saving this one because it's a different episode. I haven't listened to it yet. I'm excited to. I wanted just you to provide some context, set the scene a little bit. How did this come about? Because this was not planned.
No, it wasn't. I was just with Pammy during the holiday season. We always see each other when I'm back in Fort Lauderdale, and she had some recording equipment from you, because we were doing some recordings, for sailing stories, which, we're sort of just had been recording some things that we haven't put together yet on anything. But Peter Grimm, her dear friend and my friend, swung by because I was in town. I was over at the house, and we just started chatting. I think it was Pam's idea. She just said, well, hold on, why don't we start recording right now? And it really ended up being, it was my idea to say, this really should be on the wind because this is more interview style, and Peter would be perfect for on the wind because of his background. So I was like on the fly. We were just like, let's do it. We're doing an episode right now. And we did it.
That's so cool. So give me some, two more contextual questions. Give me the 30-second elevator pitch on Peter Grimm. Why is he so perfect for On the Wind?
Oh, well, I actually legitimately wanted to interview him and ask him more about his start with sailing in the same fashion that you interview people. He's been a sailmaker in South Florida and Fort Lauderdale for, I don't know, maybe 30 years or more than that by now. He used to work at the Super Sailmaker Loft, which is now first was bought by Doyle and now is North Sails. And he and my father's best friend were work colleagues there for many years when we were younger. And he now outfits all of the big mega yachts. But the thing with Peter that's really fun is he's been sailing since he's he's a kid, and he grew up sort of through all of like racing on maxis and like the big SORC campaigns. And he even did an America's Cup campaign. They didn't go to the final event, but he was out here in San Francisco with the Blackcollar campaign. I don't remember what boat, but we we talked. It was one of the things that we don't talk about, I don't think, in this conversation. But no, and he's still a sailmaker and very dialed in with the now more the mega yacht world in South Florida.
So there's a small world connection between you, us, and Pam as well. You grew up with Pam's daughter, right? You were friends back in the day. Can you just tell us briefly about that? Because when you applied to work for us, it was like you mentioned something like that, and I was like, oh wow, this is a cool coincidence. Yeah. So just give us the brief background on how you know.
Yeah,
Pam.
I mean that's a longer story, I would have to say, but they. When they sailed around the world, I mean, long story short, when they sailed around the world, they ended when Sammy was of high school age. And she started the first day of high school at my high school. So I met her, like, I would say the second time around on the first day of high school, freshman year. And I mean, basically we became best of friends, and she was one of my best friends all the way until the end. And the first time I sailed on an overnight voyage was with them on on Candarrick and stuff like that. But even further back, like I met her when she and Pam came back to Fort Lauderdale when I don't even know the age, like maybe 8 or 10, they came because I went to middle school with her cousins, with Samantha's cousins. She has twin boy cousins that are my age, our age, and they were in my grade since we were like 8 years old, Warren and Joseph.
Wow.
So she came to school one day when we were really young. And my very, very, very first memory of her was being at class with us for the day. And I stole her away on the recess field. And she had this amazing accent and this long blonde hair. She was like in New Zealand at the time or something. And she was telling me stories about Tahiti and living on the boat with her family and speaking French. And I mean, it's such a long ago memory that it almost like seems like a dream, but it's kind of, and then we were reunited years later.
Wow.
She also went to elementary school for like a half a year around that time. I didn't really know her, but like she knew some of my other friends. So when she arrived for high school, she fell in with all of us, and she was very outgoing and very friendly and really really just outgoing. So we were all very dear friends, and I was friends with her till the end, man.
That's so cool. I'll have to interview you sometime to get the long story here, but this is just going to be that we're going to put this at the top of your episode because again, I'm excited to hear it. I love when people come in and guest host these episodes because I get to listen to them as a fan. So excited to listen to this one, and I really thank you for making that happen. That's a really cool story.
Absolutely. It was, and then I should also just say that Pammy and I have remained dear friends, and she really has been like a mentor and a friend to me, almost more like an auntie, to be honest. And we've worked together, and we've been there for each other for many years. So we remain very close. Cool.
Super cool. Well, thank you, Laura. I'm excited to listen to this, and we'll hear from you next time.
All right. Thanks. You.
On the Wind is presented by The Quarterdeck, our very own online platform where we dive deep on all aspects of seamanship. If you're not yet a member, you can go to quarterdeck.59-north.com, get a 2-week free trial, and hope that you stick around to join us for an annual subscription. August, myself, Mia, Nikki, the skippers at 59 North, and the host of over 400 members talk all sorts of things seamanship on this platform. We post articles, videos, podcasts. It's super fun, great way to connect with like-minded sailors, and something that August and I have been really passionate about since we started it about 4 years ago now. So check out quarterdeck.59-north.com. Learn what you need to know about seamanship and talk to us directly on there. We hope to see you on the quarterdeck, shipmates. You're listening to On the Wind, my podcast about offshore sailing. I'm your host, Andy Schell. Friend of the podcast, Pam Wall, and our own Laura Parent do an On the Wind takeover this week to interview sailmaker and America's Cup sailor Peter Grimm. On an impromptu afternoon in Pam's living room in Fort Lauderdale, stories started flying and Pam said, "Get the mics!" And this entertaining and charming episode was born. Big shout out to Pam and Laura for literally running the show this week. Enjoy their conversation with Peter Grimm.
Anyway, yeah, that was from January. But here I am today sitting with Pam Wall in her living room in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and a mutual friend of ours both, Peter Grimm, and we're going to do a little recording for On the Wind. And I'm Laura Parent. I work for Andy and Mia behind the scenes. I've been working for them since 2021 as kind of general admin, shore support, and just help run the business on the backside of things. Some of you may know me from the emails. And here we are. We're going to do a off the cuff conversation with three sailors that have all kind of been working in the industry for many years. Peter and Pam, many more years than me, but they're both dear friends of mine. And I've been wanting to interview both of them kind of and had the idea to just try to grab both of them at the same time because they're great friends. So let's start by finding out, how do you both know each other? Because you guys have a very interesting background. Pam, you want to start?
Thank you, Laura. Hello, everybody. It's always exciting for me to be a small part of 59 North as well. I love telling stories, and I love giving podcasts with Andy and Mia, and now with Laura and with Emma in the past, and now with Laura. Laura Parent is sitting across from me in my living room here, and Andy and Mia both and Emma all know this room very well, and we invited Peter Grimm, who is a very well-known sailmaker, to come and just have a fun day with us. And we decided to share the fun with everybody else at 59 North. So here we are together. Just very, very briefly, I have done a few podcasts for On the Wind. As a matter of fact, as Andy might have told you before, we did the very first podcast together for 59 North in my backyard several years ago when both of the Swans were here. Ishbourne and Ice Bear, thank you, across the street from me. And that was the beginning of a wonderful relationship of further times that we could get together and talk to the people who really enjoy 59 North as well as all of us. So Laura, just really briefly, I have to tell you about, she became my daughter's best friend. We were sailing around the world, and we got to New Zealand, and unfortunately I was ill, and the whole family had to fly home and leave our boat in Whangarei. And Samantha went to school one day here, a school she'd never been to before, in Fort Lauderdale, while I was in the hospital. And with her cousins. With her cousins, two twin boys who went to St. Anthony's, and she met Laura Parent, and the two of them got to meet each other, and it's been the most beautiful relationship over the years, hasn't it, Laura?
Yes.
You know, it's as a matter of fact, I have the honor of telling you that Laura Parent, who's become an incredible sailor herself, had her first sail aboard our boat, Kendaric, down in the Florida Keys with Samantha. And anyone who comes to my house, what was it? You were 15 years old? And I have some of the cutest pictures of these two girls having an absolute ball, just as close to Fort Lauderdale as Biscayne Bay. So, Laura, we're going to talk more about you later. Okay. But then I want to tell you about little tiny Peter Grimm, who when he was 7 years old, Peter Grimm Jr., Peter's dad, Peter Grimm Sr., was a really well-known racing enthusiast up in the Great Lakes. And then later when he came down to Florida in the SORC, he had several boats that I can remember, beautiful boats. But it was because of Peter Grimm Sr. that I was able to meet the man who was going to spend the most wonderful married life with me, Andy Wall, because Andy Wall was the captain aboard Peter Grimm Sr.'s boat Panacea, which was incredible. I never would have met Andy if it hadn't been for Peter.
Peter Sr.
Peter Sr. So Peter Grimm Jr., who's sitting right next to me here, I don't know if he remembers what a terrible babysitter I was, but I took him out on boats. I took him up to Lion Country Safari. He got to meet Andy, my husband, and we have been really dear friends ever since. I mean, I loved Peter Grimm Jr. and his sisters and his brother, but it was Peter Grimm Jr. that was the one who took my heart away. So back to Laura. That's a brief introduction to the three of us here.
Wow. So Pam was actually your babysitter? Do I have that right?
You sure do. Hard to believe.
What was your first memory of Pam?
I would say just that she was our babysitter. I'm the oldest of four, and she was a powerhouse. Definitely made us obey the rules. And but I got to tell you, even when I was a little kid, I knew she was a beautiful woman, and for sure that's what I thought. And her husband to be was the captain of my dad's 52-foot race boat, Andy Wall. And so that's how I got to know both Pam and Andy.
So how old were you?
I think I don't know, Pam thinks I was 7. I think I was 10. Who knows? It's a long time ago. But I was a little kid, and, I just had a passion for sailing. And I think because of her background in sailing, her husband's not yet husband was an incredible sailor. When he was running my dad's boats, I sailed on the boat a lot. So he taught me a lot of things, from making a Turk's head to how to tie a bowline properly and how to do a lot of things.
And reading you spooky stories.
Yeah, he would scare the heck out of the 4 of my brothers and sisters. And he put us in the dinghy and towed us when we got in trouble, because that was like timeout back then. Literally, we were in the dire dow, a 7-foot dire dow, off the back of the boat, and 3 of us would be me and my 2 sisters because we weren't behaving, and he would tow us for an hour until we got straight. So anyways.
So was the boat in the Great Lakes, or was it in Florida?
It was both. I remember the dinghy towing story was going out the St. Lawrence Seaway in the Great Lakes. But the boat was also in Florida because they raced it in the Chicago Mackinac race, as well as they raced it in the Bermuda race and the SORC. So I learned a lot from Andy, and certainly he had a lot to do with my raw passion for sailing. Wow. Yeah, absolutely.
So remind us again what kind of boat that was?
Panacea was a Charlie Morgan design, 52-foot custom ketch. Very, very great boat. Won a lot of races, and my father had it for about almost 2 years. Incredible.
Nice. Wow. So sounds like you got a lot of early exposure to some great racing, and it turned into a passion of yours pretty young. Would you say that?
Absolutely. 100%.
Okay. So Peter, then tell us a little bit more about your background with sailing. I know your father was an avid racer, sounds like. Can you tell us a little bit more about your background there?
Sure. My father was always involved in sailing, and from probably the time I was 5 years old, when I think he set me free in a dire dow and said, go learn how to sail. It just went from there. And any time I could get on the water, whether it was a Sunfish, an Optimist dinghy, back then it would have been a Lightning, a Comet, you name it, I would go sailing. And I want to give total props to my mom. She would literally say, go out and go sailing. I mean, can you imagine your mom telling you that? And, really just always sailed. If I had a chance to do anything and sailing was part of it, I did it. And I just loved the water. And I did a lot of racing, but I just loved sailing.
Awesome. Nice. And so how did that, I know we didn't explain a lot about what you do now, but Peter's a sailmaker. He's worked for a lot of different lofts and businesses over the years, which we'll get to, I think. But I guess, when did you transition? Were you always working in the sailing industry from the beginning of your career? You want to tell us about that? And maybe like from, college?
I definitely always wanted to be a sailmaker. I just thought that was, the coolest job. And I knew that if I was a sailmaker, I'd always be able to sail.
There you go.
And so at any rate, as I grew up, I was a loft rat where I would, go sweep the loft floor. I've worked for Hood Sailmakers, Doyle Sailmakers, along with Super Sailmakers, and now with North Sails. And I started it in '83. And much to my father's dismay, he wanted me to, quote, have a real job. And at a Thanksgiving dinner, my mother said to my dad, well, what did you think he was going to do? That's all you do. So that's how I stayed in it. And I just would do any kind of racing I could ever get my hands on. Didn't matter what it was. I was in it there, deliver a boat, go cruising. Any opportunity I had, I was gone.
And this was all in Fort Lauderdale?
Actually, in the Great Lakes, in Europe, the Caribbean, Florida. I think that was sort of the original part of what we did. Our family did a lot of cruising. So my father had a couple different boats that we cruised on. And as a result, we sailed all over the place. And, I just remember that's what we were doing. And my father was very much, we were all going to learn how to do it. And like I said, my mother would be like, get going, tie that knot faster, and it's just an incredible way to grow up. I mean, I could go on with stories you couldn't believe. I have goosebumps. You can't write this stuff.
Sounds like you love what you do.
I do.
So when did it turn into a career, though? So you went to did you go to college?
Yes, I went to University of Miami, and then I
you were a swimmer.
Right, and I moved on to University of Wisconsin-Madison.
Oh, okay. Isn't that where you went?
Yes, that's right.
Oh, wow. So many connections between you and I.
For sailors, Mendota is right there,
Wow. So you graduated from there?
Yes.
With a degree in?
Finance.
Okay.
Yeah, and all I wanted to do was sail. That was it. I was just appeasing my father. And with the degree, you mean? With correct.
The college degree.
Within 3 months after getting out of school, I got a call from the captain of Kealoha, which was one of the more famous racing boats at the time. And they were in San Francisco racing the Big Boat Series. And I got told, hey, Peter, we're short crew. You got to come to California. I was like, you don't understand. I've a regular job now. That's going to be my life. I can't do it. And long story short, 2 days later, I was on an airplane going to San Francisco. And after we ended up winning the Big Boat Series in our class, cutting to the chase, 2 weeks later, one of the guys at Hood Sailmakers asked me if I could do them a favor because the boat was in California and Hood at the time was in Marblehead, Massachusetts. So I said, yeah, I'll take care of it. And the I'll take care of it led to, hey, Peter, do you think you could just talk to the clients and then I'll stay in the office and do these other things? And I thought, yeah, I can do that. So literally I would live on whatever race boat we were working on. And back at Hood, there was a racing team and we just raced all over the world on different boats. Wow. And so they told me, hey, Grimm, we need to sell this guy a sail. Or the owner would ask me, hey, Peter, what do you think about this sail? Should we get another one? Because they thought of me as kind of a less interested party as the guys that actually made the sails. And back then, if you were the guy that made the sails, that was the guy. But at this time, they were like, well, we got to have a sales force. So Peter's, you can tell I'm long-winded.
So you were on board as a racer / sailor / boat captain, the boat captain? Or not
I was never the captain. I was just a sailor in the crew. But at that point in sailmaking, if you wanted to keep your clients, and we were the largest sailmaker in the world, you had to have representation on board. Sure. Okay. So I was an unusual situation where I wasn't in the loft making sails. I just ultimately very quickly figured out it was pretty easy to sell things. Wow. And so I started selling sails, and that was it. Off we went sailing.
So you became like a sailing sales guy.
Correct.
Who was out in the regattas sailing and representing the loft to get more clients.
Back then, we were there was all Corinthian sailors. There's nobody getting paid.
Ask you about that.
The only paid sailor on the boat would have been the captain.
Okay,
and then everybody else was absolutely 100%. They called us amateurs, but Corinthian sailors is what we were. They were some of the best sailors I ever sailed with in the world, and certainly taught me things. But all I wanted to do at that point was race, because that was, we just raced everywhere, whether it was Hawaii, the SORC, Sardinia, New England, the Great Lakes. Absolutely. And the boats would go from one place to another. And sometimes I would actually do the delivery on the boat. Gotcha. And spend 3 days. And, I did everything I could to become more proficient at sailing.
And now, did you have you were working for Hood? I was
working.
Did you live in Massachusetts during those years?
No, I actually lived in Fort Lauderdale, but at that point I didn't live here. I was never home. I was racing. I was told by a friend of mine in college that I'll never be serious about anything because I'm always gone sailing.
Now, when does your marriage and kids fall into the?
Oh, okay. So so I met Wendy, Peter and Julia's mama, at my sister's wedding, and Wendy and my mom were buddies. And Wendy had never been exposed to the Atlantic Ocean or anything. She was from Omaha, Nebraska. And we were in Wisconsin in the Great Lakes. And I was sailing that summer there. So we were at my sister's wedding, and I met her, and I fell madly in love with her. And evidently she fell madly in love with me. And so we got married a year later and had Peter and Julia. And
what year was that?
That would have been in 84. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it was actually super fun because we were married for 3 years before we had kids. Mm-hmm. And Wendy was so stoked to go to this place, that place. I mean, we were in Block Island. We were in, Sardinia. We were, in Hawaii. And we ended up buying our own race boat together. And what was really cool about that, Wendy was really good with people. And so she had our crew so stoked that they wanted to sail on the boat because we had good food. We always had it set up when we showed up somewhere. Wendy had it sorted out. So that was a lot of fun. It was a Sovereign 33.
Oh, I know.
Called
those.
Totally Awesome. And that's the term in California then was, that was totally awesome, man. So he named our boat Totally Awesome, which was a lot of fun. We had a great time.
Wait, did you sail it on like a Transpac or Pac?
No, we never did that. Okay. Back then, if I raced on the West Coast, it was always on a client's boat, with Hood. But this boat we owned outright. We raced it for 3 years. And basically at that point, people didn't want to race against the sailmaker because they were going to get beat. So Wendy figured out early on, hey, Peter, we got to get rid of this boat. And you just sail with clients. And actually it was a great forethought on her part because people were very excited to have you on their boat to teach them how to race their boat. And that was something that sort of came naturally to me. I'm a teacher. I like trying to nurture people, and I wanted them to make sure that they loved their boat and loved sailing. I didn't want them to think, oh, we just come on your boat and yell at you and tell you what to do, because that's not what we did.
And now you still do that to this day.
That's correct. Absolutely.
And so tell us after Hood, you said you worked for Doyle?
So then I met Robbie Doyle and another fellow named Bob Mahar, and I'm going to say that was 88. And at that point, Hood was changing hands, going a different direction. And I met Robbie at a regatta, spoke to him. I knew who he was. And he said, hey, you should come to work for us. And I was kind of like, I don't want to do it myself. So Bob Mahar, another fellow that was a little older than me, but Fort Lauderdale native, he said, hey, I'm going to buy this business, Super Sailmakers, and we can be the Doyle, franchisee. So that was in 88. And I worked for the Mahars and the Doyles for 31 years. Unbelievable time. I learned more about sailing, people, boat design. I mean, any aspect of the sport was just incredible. But for me, it was the people. I've known some of the most amazing people in my life. And it doesn't matter whether you have a 20-footer or a 200-footer, I'm your guy. I just want to help you out. And it doesn't matter whether you race or cruise. I love helping people enjoy sailing.
I've always known you as that type of person. And Super Sailmaker is where, our connection
this is pretty amazing.
John Antweiler was at Super Sailmaker for all those years. And so you were colleagues with him. And then John Antweiler is my father's best friend, who graduated from New York Maritime, also known as SUNY Maritime. They were in the same graduating class in 1968. And John was he from Fort Lauderdale? I know his wife's from.
No, John's from Ohio.
Oh, that's right. Judy's from Fort Lauderdale.
And Judy, I knew her family from going to high school at Pinecrest.
Okay.
Which was crazy.
Got it. That makes sense. And so John and Judy got established here.
Correct.
Once they got married, and my dad and him always remained best friends.
Correct.
And then my dad was a pilot, Port Everglades, was a bar pilot. So Peter used to hear stories at the loft from John about.
Absolutely. John was our sail designer and one of the most amazing engineers. I mean, an incredible guy. And so he and I would have sail design meetings that would last an hour long. 10 minutes was sail design. 50 minutes was, Laura's dad, what he did, who they sailed with, what they did, adventures here and there. And
stories about my dad on the big ships, maybe.
Yeah, just everything, that he was a model builder, and he had this catboat, and the first time I met Laura's father, I was just awestruck. I was just standing there. Hi, Mr. Parent. How are you? And he and John started talking. They're both super down to earth, very humble. Anyways, that was when he was Mr. Parent. And I think I would have a hard time calling him Rolly to his face now. I'd probably still call him Mr. Parent. But anyways, there's so much to this that's...
I know, we can go on and on. Let's think. Should we...
I think we should ask Pam more stuff.
I've got to add to what Peter has been talking about
please.
there. Of course, I felt the same way about Mr. Parent, okay, except that I used him to help me always keep my boat models.
Oh, your
he did
little
all the rigging on my boat models.
That's right.
Yeah. And
the Azores whaleboat.
Right. And he was just so wonderful. And I used to love going to your house, Laura, because of all the models that he had made that were so magnificent.
I should interview him. That he'd be fun.
You should introduce him sometime. Yeah, but then you remind me of John Antweiler, because John and Andy started working in the rigging. My Andy Wall.
Oh yeah, before Super Sailmakers.
Was way before Super Sailmakers, doing rigging together.
Oh, that's
and they started making these sort of books of everybody's, if people wanted it, of the rigging on all their boats, so that they knew what that rigging was, if they needed to replace it, and what diameter it was, and how long it was, and then they also designed probably the best lazy jacks that anybody ever designed together.
Really?
And it was wonderful. And of course, Judy and I were having babies at the same time.
Right.
And
'Cause Andrew's the same age as me. and
Yeah,
Samantha.
yeah. And I mean, it was just a wonderful, wonderful relationship. I see them very rarely at the Hillsborough Inlet Sailing Club, but I wish I saw them more often. But like you say, John and Mr. Parent were geniuses.
I have to tell you a memory and see if you remember this. Back when I got off the schooners. I worked on the schooners down in Key West for a couple of years. It was 2000 and 2001. I worked on Liberty Clipper full-time, live aboard crew. And when I got off and moved back to Fort Lauderdale, I was doing like freelance work and I was doing day work. And do you remember when I worked for Andrew Wall Rigging? I went as his assistant for, I would say, about 2 weeks. And I would, not every single day, but maybe like a couple days a week, he would let me know the night before, you can join me on this job. And he paid me cash, and he'd pick me up in the white van at like 9 o'clock in the morning. And I rode all around basically Broward County, Palm Beach County, maybe even Miami. And I worked as his assistant as a rigger for the full day. He'd send me up the rig on a bosun's chair and he'd give me little jobs. Cause I had the Marlin Spike seamanship background already from working a couple of years on the schooners. And, I learned from Andy a lot too, and those were very sweet memories of mine. And I remember, you guys had a Christmas party one year. Yeah. And he was drinking rum, as he likes to do. And
I'm not going to tell the story after that rum.
Okay. I just remember him coming up to me after he had had a few drinks, and he was just like, "Laura, I'm giving you a bonus." And I think he gave me $100 or something. And he was just like, thanked me because I worked for him probably in more the holiday season, when I would be home. Right. And he said, "I've really enjoyed working for you, working with you, and thank you, and here you go." Do you remember that?
Of course I do. I remember that party too. And I remember afterwards saying, "Never let me have another sip of rum again."
And you've been a teetotaler since, huh? You're pretty much a teetotaler.
No, I've always been one. I'm one of those horrible people that remind you, I feel great. When he was crawling to the bathroom to throw up, that sort of thing. Sorry, Andy, I shouldn't have told him that. But I forgot about that, Laura, that you were his assistant, and it was great. And I don't know if you remember one time, if you were working with him or not, but when the first stream stays were made, the roller furling stream stays, remember those? I can't remember the name of the gentleman who
John, I can't think of his last name.
Yeah. Anyway, he was a great guy. And he had this long trailer where he could take all these stream stays because they didn't have foils. It was one long stream stay. And one time when Andy was rigging a boat down in Miami with a stream stay, Don Bliss, that's it. Don said, "Andy, I forgot something." And in those days, Andy let people hoist him up the mast. After that one experience, he always used his block and tackle to get up the mast because Don left and drove back to Fort Lauderdale from Miami. And in the meantime, this tropical storm came with lightning and thunder, and Andy's up at the top of this high mast waiting for Don to get back so he could attach the stream stay. And, Andy's legs are getting numb and everything like that.
The rig?
Yeah. And then Don comes back and says to Andy, "Why didn't you come down?" And he said, "Because you hoisted me up here and then you left." And Andy said after that, he always used his own block and tackle, his 4-part block and tackle, no matter if the mast was 60 feet high or 90 feet high. He would always pull himself up by himself. Never trust another person.
I think he may have sent me up with that. But is there the option on that one for someone to send you up from the deck?
I think so, but he would pull himself.
Block it and then pull it up.
Wait, so I want to tell the story then about during that same time when I was freelancing and I did day work, I ended up on a 50-meter Perini Navi called Perseus. It was the Perseus 1. It was a ketch. It was an amazing boat. And I was working as a deckhand day worker alongside, not at Pier 66, but just across the intercoastal from Pier 66. And I worked for them for about a month. And then there were a few of us deckhands. And when the time came for the boat to position down to St. Thomas, 1,000 miles, the captain only asked me. I was the only deckhand of the 3 day workers that he asked me, because I had already had my 100-ton license by then. And he said, hey, we can use like another hand. And he hired me on. And I just did a week. I brought it down. They flew me home. But then Peter and I found out years later that the captain I worked with was like your best friend or something.
True.
Tell me about that.
So Jonathan Klein is a lifelong friend of mine. I probably met him in like 1972 over on the beach, where a bunch of us surfed and sailed. And he was a Hobie Cat guy. That was Jonathan.
Okay.
He loved Hobie Cats. But anyways, Jonathan was the captain of several boats, and he would a lot of times have the owners buy sails from me. So on the Perseus, the 50-meter Perini, they had bought a set of Doyle sails, which we had put on the boat. And that was right around the time Laura was working for them.
And by the way, Peter and I really didn't know each other back then.
No, she was 2 and I was 40.
I knew your name. And like, you probably knew my name, but I wouldn't have known who you were if you got on the boat.
Absolutely.
And likewise, the other way around.
And Jonathan used to have what we called study hall time. And I could tell by his face when I'd walk up to the boat, no chatting to the crew, no, just come straight into the wheelhouse with me. We're going to talk about this, get this, and this sorted out. And what a lovely guy. Still one of my best friends today. And I've probably sailed more miles on more with him than you could possibly imagine.
So was that like one of the first super yachts you maybe outfitted?
It was interesting back then, quote unquote, nobody would race super yachts. And the first super yacht regatta would have been probably the Nantucket Bucket, which then they put together this regatta called the St. Bart's Bucket. Right. And someone asked me, can you race these boats? And I'd be like, sure. Let's just get our buddies together and go race them. And that really began, I think, the real motion of racing super yachts and really changed the sport, because the owners, it goes right back. The owners were having fun. And these were not flat out race boats. These were cruising boats with, Steinway pianos in the main salon, and just really kind of an amazing stories. And they were like, well, Peter, how many crew do you have to have? So we just use the crew that's on the boat. Everything's electric or hydraulic, and we'd be taking the spinnaker down, in the sock, like we would have been on a 50-foot cruising boat, only this was a 160-foot catch.
What?
But if someone tells you you can't do it, at least for me, I'm the first one in line to go try and do it. But always, trying to just make sure the owner had a good time. And Jonathan and I were all about that. And
so can I ask you, where does that come from? Like, where does that drive come from within you? What makes you want to push to make those things happen?
I think, gosh, I would say it kind of goes back to my mom in terms of how I was raised. She was always, you could go do this, just do it, figure it out, and be nice and have a good time. So as it played forward into my career, I definitely wanted to make sure everybody was having fun. And the whole passion of it was always fun, and people could see it in me that I was having a good time. And as I grew older in the sport, and by the time I got to super yachts, I became the crew boss, and I tried to keep it light. And in the same breath, I'm very competitive. If you want to race 2 bricks, I'll be in there, be sanding my brick down. But at any rate, it's the people, the fun, and it's a script you couldn't write.
Wow.
Yeah, because the boats got bigger and faster, and this happened, that happened, and pretty soon now I race a 60-meter sloop. Designed by Ron Holland, built by Perini. It's a total outlier. There's nothing like it in the world. In fact, the spinnaker on it is 28,000 square feet. That's the largest spinnaker ever built in the world, even today. And it's pretty amazing sailing that boat. We're gonna race it in the Millennium Cup in Auckland, New Zealand at the very end of February. So again,
wow,
an amazing.
You need some crew.
Yeah, well, I already invited you, but you've conveniently forgotten that.
Oh, what? Come on, hey.
Anyways,
is the invitation still open?
Well, you never know. Anyways, we can't go there.
I wanted to hear a little bit more about
Making stories.
Okay.
Because we're all here, and we I know it sounds so crazy, but we're all kind of gelled together. Because my first job that I really enjoyed, besides being a yacht broker and luckily meeting Andy Wall as he was walking down in front of the yacht brokerage house, was working for a company called Maxshaw Sailmakers, which was a small sail loft here in Fort Lauderdale. And I didn't have a clue, Peter, about how to make or design sails or anything. But you know me, I have the gift for the gab, and I was at the front desk all the time. And I got to meet every single customer that came in. That was fabulous. I mean, it was so much fun. Mm-hmm. And I had a ball. I mean, it was the best job I could have had because I met so many different interesting people on sailboats. And of course, I didn't have to stitch anything up or design anything. Mm-hmm. But my favorite story about that was this good-looking young guy came in once, and Andy, my husband Andy, sent him to Maxshaw Sailmakers because Andy was doing the rigging work on his boat way up the river. Right. It was a real old wooden boat. And he came in, he signed in, he brought his sails and everything like that. And he was charming and delightful, and then he left. And then someone came running in from the loft who had seen him come in and said, "That was Jimmy Buffett." And I said, "Who's Jimmy Buffett?" What? I said, she said, "You don't know who Jimmy Buffett is,
What?
And then when he came back in again, I had to make up for it. Anyway, that was one of the highlights of working at Maxshaw Sailmakers.
That's awesome.
Yeah, but it was so funny because I didn't know who he was, and now he's probably my favorite of all time.
Oh my God!
You know what I mean?
I think we all sailors, seriously, we all sailors owe a lot to Jimmy Buffett and the lifestyle that he introduced so many of us to. I know I can say that for sure. When I was 16 years old, sitting on my dad's boat in the cat boat, I had all my little Jimmy Buffett CDs on my old little portable. Oh my God! Yeah.
Stick in.
Peter, I wanted to ask you a little bit more about the super yachting stuff. So I know, and then did we already mention that you've gone on to, you work for actually North Sails now?
Correct. In 2019, Robbie Doyle sold the company in 2017. And so I was working with Bob Mahar Sr. His son's my boss now at North, but funny how things go. So we looked around for opportunities for about 2 years. And at that point, once Robbie was out of the company, it's a completely different culture. The new owners took it in a different direction. So we thought, should we stay in sail making? We didn't want to be a business for ourselves. And all the time people would say, you should go to work for North. And I competed against those guys, both as a salesman and on the race course. So I thought, I'll never work there. Never say never. Mm-hmm. And pretty soon it became really obvious to me, all the guys that worked there, I actually knew pretty well. And we, all helped each other out. And so we ended up cutting to the chase. We ended up going to work for North, and we announced it April 1st, April Fool's Day, in 2019. And, it's a great, unbelievable company to work for, and a great move for me. And, I live in Fort Lauderdale. My boss is a guy that I worked with for 20 years. He's younger than I am, which is phenomenal. And, still working in Fort Lauderdale. I still work with the brokers. I work with the customers, the boat builders. And so my job really is just as a salesman, but I really just teach people to enjoy their boats, whether they're racing, cruiser racing, long distance sailing. Like this, I'm going to race to Bermuda this summer on a Morris offshore 38 with six of us. We're all buddies, and we're just going to go do it. And someone said to me, Peter, why would you race on a boat that little? I said, because it's going to be fun. We're going to have a good time with my friends. You know, why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
So that's, you know, part of that. North gave me some new opportunities that I wouldn't have had. And at the end of the day, you know, it's an amazing career.
I have to say something to that too. Before we go on, whenever I became a cruising consultant after I left 22 years of working for West Marine, and every person who wanted to get new sails or anything like that, I would always recommend Peter Grimm with North Sails. And I want to tell you something that gave me the biggest pat on the back from every single person that Peter went down and not only helped to get new sails for them, Peter, but you took them out sailing. You explained how to sail to them. You taught them sailing.
That's still what I do.
And I tell you what, the biggest joy I got out of it, because there was nothing in my pocket, was the fact that everybody who ever had Peter come to their boat, because I recommended them, would call me up and tell me how much they appreciated it and how much they really couldn't have done what they did without Peter Grimm Jr. And I want to tell you something. It made me proud like a mother, you know, very much.
Well, you were his babysitter after all. I just love that story so much. I wanted to ask you kind of one more question. I mean, so you're still outfitting super yachts. I think you've kind of made a name for yourself as being like kind of one of the super yacht guys, right? Sales guys. And you get to race on these amazing boats. You must have some sketchy, gnarly moments out there. Can you talk about a time where you felt fear out there on the race course, one of the bucket races on one of these incredible yachts, like rounding marks? I mean, holy cow. You must have some stories.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I'll tell you one that comes to mind when we were first racing the 60-meter sloop, which is called Perseus Cubed. We had a sail called the Code Zero, which is a very, very large sail. This thing, I think, is 19,000 square feet. And we were sailing in Virgin Gorda, and we were on a reaching leg of the race, and we chose to deploy the sail instead of just using the jib. And the boat went from 12 knots to 16 knots instantly. Every load alarm on the boat, the halyard load, the clew load sensor is blowing off. We're muting them to just keep going. Mm-hmm. And we went down the gnarliest reach that I can ever remember. And all I remember, once we had it up and going, I thought, now we got to get rid of this thing. Oh, yeah. And when we kept waiting and waiting, you know, classic racing move. We'll put it away here. We'll put it away here. Well, we waited till about 2 minutes before the mark, and the furler it was on wasn't strong enough to roll it up. Oh. So we had to take the sail down manually, and it took us about 10 minutes. Meanwhile, the skipper and the guys in the cockpit that are running the boat, you know, the tactician, they were like, we're going upwind, we're going to tack. And it took us about 10 minutes to get it down. It was about 32 of us.
So you rounded the mark?
We rounded the mark.
Oh,
and I got to tell you, taking down a 19,000 square foot sail in 20 knots was crazy.
Holy moly.
That was an example of one.
That's insane. So how long are the legs on those races?
Well, they try and make them a little longer and longer. But what happens in some of the boats either don't go well in light air. Most of them don't.
Oh, right.
And then some of the cruising versions go fine in 20 knots, but don't go well in 8 knots. So they try and make the courses where they could favor one boat one day, one style another day. They try and really mix it up. And so the legs, for example, in St. Bart's, one day you race around the island clockwise, one day you race around the island counterclockwise, and in the middle there's a course called the Wiggly course, which has some really short legs. So you have to think to yourself, risk reward. Do we put the Code Zero up for this 6-mile leg going, and we're going to go 16 knots? Is it worth, you know, the time to get it up and the time to get it down? We have a person on the boat now that I could ask the question, okay, how much to the jibe, how much time to the leeward mark, and they could give me 7 and 10. And I would know in that 10-minute leg, 3 minutes of it would be getting the sail jibed and going again, and 5 minutes of it might be getting the sail down. So would it be worth the 2 or 3 minutes gain, of doing it? And as a competitor, you're always like, we can do this, but you learn quickly that there's a risk reward trade off there.
How many people in the crew?
Well, on Perseus Cubed, the 60-meter boat, the race crew's probably 30 people that are actually both men and women. And big shout out to every single team member. We just have great people, and that's what it goes about to. It's the great people. Not everybody is a world champion. Not everybody, has this massive ego. In fact, I always make a joke when we are entertaining new crew. You've got to be able to talk to this fella's mother-in-law just as well as you can talk to the guy on the foredeck. And this is a family operation. Unbelievable. Really, one of my friends, Mike Cox, always said, Grimm, we're in the entertainment business and we're trying to make sure these people are having fun.
Aww.
And so, kind of amazing. Just all of it.
I feel that way too. And in a way, us at 59 North and, taking people offshore sailing, it's kind of the same way. We want people to fall in love with sailing and offshore sailing.
Exactly.
Racing.
Not to be afraid of it or anything like that, to know what they're doing and to really enjoy it and be stoked by the fact that they do know what they're doing. Exactly. And, but I have a quick story about one of the, and I don't even remember what year it was, Peter, but one of the regattas out of St. Bart's, the bucket regattas. Andy and I were sailing home across the Atlantic after dropping our kids off at school in France. And we'd had a very, very fast, rough passage across. And as we were entering the West Indies, we were able to put a spinnaker up. As a matter of fact, it was the pink spinnaker that you made for us, so that when we were up in the fog, we would be seen. That's why we had a pink spinnaker.
In the fog, did you say?
In the fog, going up to Ireland and stuff like that. Anyway, coming home, we put the spinnaker up because it happened to be just perfect, and we were on the starboard tack, and we didn't know that there was a regatta going on. We had just
coming into the St. Bart's.
No, we had no idea because we were sailing over from the Canary Islands. We'd been at sea for 2 weeks or something, and we're on the starboard tack, and there's this big boat with these sort of square sails up 3 masts, and it was on the port tack. And we were on a collision course.
Oh, my gosh.
And Andy said, I am staying on the starboard tack. I am sorry, Pammy. I want to get into port. I want to get in. I don't have to take down the spinnaker, jibe the spinnaker, blah, blah, blah. So we go by.
Stand on vessel.
And we missed hitting the Maltese Falcon.
It was Falcon. The Maltese Falcon.
But we got the finger from every single person on that boat because they had to fall off a little bit to let us pass by.
Were they actually racing?
Oh, yeah. They were racing.
It wasn't just a practice?
Yeah.
That's funny, Pam. Well, you were the stand-on vessel. So there's the St. Bart's bucket. What's left? Like, are any of those races still around?
So there's different regattas, but you can go to Europe in the summer in the Mediterranean, and there's, say, 5 or 6 notable regattas over there. One of them is the Rolex World Championship, which happens in September in Porto
That's Sardinia?
Correct. And if you win that one, that's the pinnacle of doing it. There's a super yacht regatta in Palma. There's one in Spain. There's the Middle Sea Race. There's a lot of different
Malta
regattas.
Is the Nantucket bucket still around?
The Nantucket bucket is sort of morphed into a regatta run out of Newport, which for all intents and purposes, we call it the Newport bucket.
Okay.
I think it's the Safe Harbor regatta now. Mm-hmm. But the the sport's changed a little bit in the super yacht racing. It just goes right back to as it evolved from, say, the late 90s, early 2000 to now. I mean, there's a group of super yachts that are flat out racing boats. And then there's a group of super yachts that are really kind of a cross between a racer, cruiser. And then there's some older cruising boats. But I think at the end of the day, it's all about the fun. So the sport's changing.
Yeah.
And I don't think every owner wants to just build a boat and have a bunch of people race with him that he doesn't necessarily know.
Yeah.
The J boats have been a huge part of racing super yachts, which is just amazing.
They're incredible.
The sport just evolves and changes. But at the end of the day, for me, you just got to make sure it's fun for everybody. And fun comes in many shapes, ways, and what you're doing. So it's really it's
and
incredible.
you got to make sure that they've got sails to
That's
sail their
right,
vessel.
right, yeah,
to sail their
selling
boat.
the sails. Yeah.
Well, Peter, this has been so much fun talking with you and Pam. By the way, it's blowing a gale outside right now. It's raining buckets. We've got a winter storm that just came through. So we're going to cozy up and have a cup of tea, I think, right? And then have some dinner. But it was so nice to see you all. And thanks for, Pam wants to close it out, but thank you all for listening.
I tell you what, you all are going to miss a whole bunch more stories as the three of us sit here and jabber away about all our experiences on the water. But, I think the greatest thing that we all three have is the love of sailing and the friends that we make around the world with that wonderful thing. And also, to me, the joy of being out at sea and going to someplace new is just the most incredible thing in the whole world. I've been so lucky. And I just want to thank Laura. And I tell you what, Laura, you're a very good, person to have around all the time for me because I don't know anything about electronics. And by the way, for anybody who's listening, we've never had an electronic anything on our boat ever. And Andy and I wouldn't know how to use them anyway. So just as well, he knew what he was doing a long time ago. So anyway, thank you, Peter.
You figured this
Wonderful
out today.
friends. And thank you, everybody, for listening to us. And thank you, 59 North.
On the Wind is the podcast about sailing, created by 59 Degrees North and hosted by me, Andy Schell, and also by August Sandberg, Emma Garshagen, and occasionally Ben Doer. The show is mixed and produced in Frederick, Maryland by Lee Cumberland. Ads are read by us, the hosts, and occasionally by 59 North's bosun Adam Brown and podcast producer Lee Cumberland. Episode artwork and website show notes are done by Laura Parent in San Francisco. The intro theme music is composed and performed by former podcast guest and musician Cameron Dale, while the outro music you're hearing now is, of course, by our friends, the Stormweather Shanty Choir. We love hearing from our fans, so send your questions and comments to holdfast@59-north.com, and please do us a favor and review the show on iTunes or wherever else you get your podcasts. Until next time, hold fast.
I made up me mind that I was inclined to go to sea no more. No more, no more, to go to sea no more. I made up me mind that I was inclined to go to sea no more. As I was walking down the street, I met sweet Angeline. She said, come home with me, me lad, and we'll have a cracking time. But when I awoke, it was no joke. I found I was all alone. my silver watch and my money too, and my whole bloody gear was gone. Was gone, was gone. My whole bloody gear was gone. It was when I awoke, it was no joke, for my whole bloody gear was gone. As I was walking down the street, I met Big Rapper Brown. I asked him if he would take me in, and he looked at me with a frown. He said,
last time you was paid up with me, you took up no score. But I'll take your advance and I'll give you a chance to go to sea once more.
once more, once more, to go to sea once more. I'll take your advance and I'll give you a chance to go to sea once more. Sometimes we're catching whales, me lads, but mostly we get none. With a 20-foot oar in every paw from 5 o'clock in the morn. And when daylight's gone and the night's coming on, we rest upon our oars. And oh boys, you wish that you was dead or snug with the girls ashore. Ashore, ashore, or snug with the girls ashore. Oh boys, you wish that you was dead or snug with the girls ashore. Come all you seafaring lads that listen to me song. When you go a big boating, boys, make sure you do not go wrong. You take my tip when you come off a trip, don't go with any horse. But get married instead and have all night in bed and go to sea no more. No more, no more, to go to sea no more. Get married instead and have all night in bed and go to sea no more. No more, no more, to go to sea no more. Get married instead and have all night in bed and go to sea no more.